So what are enticing readings? Readings need to entice students into the conversation with interesting topics and ideas. They need to be topics about which students can have an opinion and not be so authoritative that there's nothing for them to say. Every essay in this book is an invitation to a topic and a potential discussion. So if we take a look at some of the readings here, for instance, in Ethics and Philosophy, very first essay, Nature Through the Looking Glass. This is a great essay about the schizophrenic relationship that people seem to have with nature, wanting to subjugate it versus adore it, on the other hand. The Happy Meter, another wonderful essay that is entirely teachable because it discusses what is the nature of happiness and how do we measure happiness and whether your students can be happy. If we scroll down to, let's say, Society and Public Discourse, interesting essays here about materialism. This particular one I like a lot, Is Philanthropy a Good Idea?, which discusses the role of government versus philanthropy in our society. Interesting topic for your students to engage in. Government and institutions. This one is all about the prison system and the prison industrial complex, privacy and its invasion, the responsibilities that citizenship requires of people. If we move down to education and learning, the role of traveling as part of education. Should everybody go to college? And why aren't there more vocational programs available? Learning to fail, the nature of failure, and whether our society is set up to allow for these structures to utilize failure in a positive way. The list goes on and on. Family and relationships, with this particular one, hooking up, the idea of how the hookup phenomenon with Tinder and other apps has really changed the nature of dating and courtship. Your students will love to talk about this. Friends for life, not likely. Another one which discusses the role of friendship and whether friendships are meant to last forever and what are the kinds of friendships that are currently available. There are so many different essays that are interesting. Culture and identity, the idea of the superhero craze, millennials and the I generation, which takes a different look at the traditional condemnation of these two generations to talk about what actually might be happening there. So there are so many possibilities, but don't take our word for it. Let's take a look at some survey results. A Reader's Guide to Writing has essays students want to read. How do we know? Because they tell us this anecdotally. A recent anonymous survey with over 1,200 responses from students who were using this curriculum and were enrolled in required composition courses, not elective ones, indicated that 50% of students read more essays than were assigned just because they were interested. Nearly 80% of those students found the reading selections interesting to read. Almost 85% thought the materials helped them become better critical readers, which of course translated to their writing as well. Another factor that really makes an essay enticing for students, and I think arguably for instructors as well, is that it needs to be visually appealing. It cannot simply be a block of text that is uploaded to a course management system. So in this example here from 7.2, BIOS 2.0, a very interesting essay that discusses the role of artificial intelligence in, I think, a different way. We can scroll down and we have very interesting pictures, the Killing Machine, RoboCop, Stephen Hawking as part of the AI theory, Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and nirvana. So this is a very interesting, visually appealing text that is broken up with these pictures that clearly relate to the theme of the text. And in many essays, readings, there are videos that accompany these and are embedded as well. And if we continue to scroll down, there are vocabulary words here that students will look up, and those are highlighted and put in bold in the text. And then, of course, we have the review questions that accompany every single essay. So the text itself is broken up. Students have an opportunity to look for reading comprehension to understand what they understood about the text itself. The last thing that I want to mention is the role that teaching resources play in making an essay enticing and inviting. So, for instance, if I click on Chapter 7 Essay Resources and I go down to 7.2c, which are the resources for the BIOS 2.0 essay, let me go to full screen here. So for the teacher, we have certain elements, the essay executive summary, the various main points and whatnot, and then ideas for how to teach this essay, what it pairs with, and the classroom teaching and extension activities. So for instance, these are links to different videos that might be interesting, TED Talks that will really contextualize the issue of automation and artificial intelligence, the role of the history of jobs and automation, a short video by The Economist about the future of work. All of these things apply to your students entirely, and they provide an additional feature for the essay that puts it into a context that is also enticing and interesting, provides a framework for further discussion and further thought. So the essay doesn't stand on its own. It can be supported by a host of other elements. In this case, we have 8 different things, like what is the Turing test? Very interesting. If you haven't seen Blade Runner, that section, you really ought to. But the Turing test then allows for students to take a Turing test. And then, of course, we have the reading comprehension and opinion and elaboration questions that you can totally utilize. This makes essays like BIOS 2.0 profoundly interesting to students, and they become much more engaged than by just having straight text. So ultimately, a reader's guide to writing provides enticing, visually appealing, and appropriately leveled readings that resonate with students. The teaching resources take it a step further and provide links to fascinating articles and videos that contextualize and expand the reading selection and make your life easier.